So finally, my review on the Canon EOS R6. I know when I got this camera around Christmas time, I said I would be making a review for this right away. I was super excited about making that review, but it ended up taking a little while because I wanted a little bit more time with this camera to kind of explore with it and to do a couple different shoots with it. And overall, I've really enjoyed using this camera over the past month or so. There's a lot of different things I want to talk a bit about it. Positive in many ways and negative in some other ways. I want to mainly focus on shooting for video or for film with this camera. I've shot a number of great pictures with this camera, but I think I want a little bit more time with it to really do a proper photography review for it. Before we get started, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Brian. I do this filmmaking channel here where I do gear reviews, visual effects breakdowns, editing tutorials, all that kind of fun stuff. And I do a lot of behind the scenes videos for my main channel called CK Productions, where we do a lot of comedic video game related short films on there, a lot of fun, different, kind of videos. And a lot of times I'll bring those videos onto here and do behind the scenes for them as well. So if you're interested in any of that, be sure to smash the like button down below and subscribe for videos twice a week, or when I can. So if you don't know much about this camera, this is one of Canon's latest R series cameras, and it came out along with the Canon EOS R5. This is kind of the less expensive, slightly lower tier version than the R5. This costs $2,500, where the R5 costs about $3,900. This camera shoots internal 4K up to 60 frames per second and 120 frames per second in HD. It's got a full frame RF sensor here. So if you don't have RF lenses, you have to get an adapter like this to use your EF lenses on. But the adapter isn't that expensive. It's only about $99, which is honestly pretty good for an electronic adapter. Something like a Metabone adapter can be like 300 bucks or so. So like I said before, I've been wanting to get a mirrorless camera for myself. And I've always liked the picture and the color science that Canon has put out. And I wasn't quite happy about the old mirrorless cameras that they first came out when they first started doing mirrorless cameras. But when these came out, I was a lot more intrigued and I was a lot more interested. Now, I think the best comparison to use when talking about the R5 and the R6, where the R5 is like the 5D, the R6 is like the 6D. You get a lot of bang for your buck with it. Like the 6D, I got this about 6 years ago. I was able to do a lot of different stuff in terms of photography and filmmaking with that. I expect this to be kind of the same package. Not a huge price point, but you get a lot for it, but you just don't get some of those extra things that make something like the R5 or the 5D just that more extra special. But if it works for what you're doing, this can serve a lot of different purposes. Now, first off, right at the bat, my first impressions when I got this camera was I've never been a huge fan of the way that mirrorless cameras have been made. I've always thought they're a little bit too small, but the build of this camera is honestly, I think, is fantastic. It pretty much almost mirrors what your traditional DSLR feels like. And holding a DSLR in your hand for photos, even for videos and stuff, has always been a great feeling. Having that kind of feeling onto a camera like this, a mirrorless camera, it's really been a breath of fresh air for me. I love the fact that it has this really nice flip out screen, something that I didn't get from my old DSLR. It's kind of funny because when I first started using this camera, it felt like sort of a blast from the past in a way. It's felt like all of the cameras that I've used over the past years all kind of built together. When I first started filmmaking with DSLRs, I owned a Canon T4i, and that also had kind of the flip out screen. So it's got components of that. It's got the build components of something like a 6D. And in terms of the video quality and the way that it shoots, that's similar to what we're shooting right now is the Canon C100 Mark II. Hi, Mooney. Here we go again. It's a combination of all the things that I've liked about my old cameras all kind of put together in one here. First of all, like whatever everyone wants to know about any type of camera is how is the quality of the footage? And the quality of the footage that's come out of this camera so far has been great. I especially love the addition of 10-bit color recording on here and the addition of true C-Log, which is something that didn't have on the old DSLRs. You get a lot of color information out of this, and it's pretty fantastic. The color science that comes out of this and the even more extra color that we have with the 10-bit color is something that I noticed right off the bat. Bringing this footage into DaVinci Resolve or bringing it into Lumetri Color, there's so much room that you can play with, in terms of exposure, in terms of just very detailed and very specific color directions that you want to go with it, saturation. In terms of actually shooting on the camera on set, it's different than what I'm used to recently, but it's back to kind of the old way that I used to shoot with when I was shooting with something like this. Shooting with a camera this size. I love the fact that this works so much better now with the stabilizer that I have, the gimbal that I have, that's kind of the Ronin S style equivalent. I can put this easily on there. It doesn't take very long to balance out, and you can easily run this around. We're using this island right here. If you saw the Mario Kart video, I was running up and down the island with this. you know, easily moving this back and forth, even doing it handheld sometimes. Definitely can't do with something as large as a C100. The fact that, you know, you have the touch screen here, you have several different ways that you can manipulate all of your different things, like your shutter speed and your aperture. You can go ahead and go right on the touch screen and change it if you want to, or you can use the traditional tools, you know, that you have here. It's very simple to do either one of those. You can even record on the touch screen and record here. I kind of wish this record button that they had on top here was a little bit bigger, or they had another option, the record button. It's a little small and not really in the best place, but honestly, it's not the end of the world. One of the biggest quirks that people talk about when talking about these types of cameras, the R6 and the R5, is its overheating issues. I've had no overheating issues with it so far. Yet again, I've never put myself in the situation where I would have any overheating issues. I'm interested going forward to see if maybe I end up having one of those issues, but I don't foresee that to be much of a problem. Another thing I've enjoyed about this camera so far, and something that I haven't used in the past very much, is its autofocus functions. Its autofocus functions have been really good, and I've made sure to, when I've gone out for shoots with this, to actually specifically turn those on and use them to test them out, and it's actually been very good. I really liked the one-touch autofocus function where you can kind of just go on the screen and give a little tap to something you want to focus on, and it quickly follows and focuses on what you're trying to focus on, whether it be a cat or a duck or, you know, anything really. It's something that I haven't used much in the past with cameras, but now the fact that I know that this camera has that function and does it very well, I could see myself using that a lot in the future. In terms of ISO limits and stuff, this has handled low light very well so far. A lot of the footage that I shot out here by the waterfall, it actually ended up being a little bit darker out than I anticipated. It was very cloudy. The sun was going down. So I ended up pushing this around, you know, 1600, 2000 ISO, which, you know, nowadays isn't huge, but the fact that you can kind of look at that and you can't really tell off the bat that it was put to something that high, is pretty great. It was very easy to manipulate the colors in post to bring it up a little brighter without giving it too much grain or any other artifacts or something like that. I've even put the camera to extreme, and the grain on it isn't as terrible as something like an old DSLR definitely would have been. It's pretty much a standard nowadays for mirrorless cameras such as like this and like Sony stuff to really have, I'm just gonna keep talking, to really have a good limit when it comes to ISO. Since you can really push this to really high limits, I know I have a little bit more breathing room in scenarios where I might need to push it a little farther than normal. Now, a couple of maybe more negative things I want to talk about this camera. So a couple things that I've noticed throughout shooting with this. The biggest thing I've disliked about this camera so far is its recording limit. It can only record up to 30 minutes of footage at a time. It's not always a problem, but the fact that it actually stops recording after 30 minutes at a time and you have to start re-recording again is kind of an issue. Also, the fact that you're shooting in 4K footage, you're shooting in these high frame rates and stuff like that, that takes a lot of space on the card. If you're shooting with something like a 64 gigabyte card, or maybe even a 120 gigabyte card, if you're shooting all day, you're gonna have to expect to swap out the cards or, you know, dump one of the cards. It's got 2 card slots here. And for photography purposes, if you wanna do backups on one card, it can do that as well. One thing I wish it did is I wish it did backups video on both cards, but that only does that for photography, unfortunately. One thing that I think could have been a little better is the screen itself. The screen itself, I think, could have been a little bit more higher quality. It's a little bit small. The picture that you're looking at is a little bit small. I wish it had options built in for focus peaking. I wish it had maybe some features built in, like some built-in ND filters. You can get one of these adapters with ND filters built into it, but it's really expensive actually. And it's kind of something that I kind of miss having. Another thing also gotta get back in the pattern of doing is changing out the battery more often. It doesn't eat up any more than a typical DSLR mirrorless camera would, but it definitely eats up pretty quickly when you're shooting, especially in 4K video. So you're gonna wanna have a lot of batteries on hand. What's great about the batteries though, is these batteries are the same LPE6 batteries that have been used for multiple DSLRs and stuff in the past. So if you've had a DSLR before this, you're most likely gonna have several of these batteries. But other than that, there's not much that I dislike about this camera. You know, there's a couple things like some of the competitors that it has obviously, you know, did a better job with the frame rates. The fact that this only has 120 frames per second in HD and not in 4K is something that's a little disappointing. But that's kind of what you get for, you know, skimping a little bit on the price. The main thing about this camera basically is not many negatives I have for it. It's just a couple of things that I'm not used to doing because of the way I was shooting the last few years that I'm gonna have to get used to doing again. That's just the nature of the beast. When you're getting a camera that's a mirrorless camera, you end up not having to pay as much as something like a larger cinema camera, but you're missing some of those you know, key features that those cameras have, because since these cameras are a little bit more simpler. But with the big plus side is obviously these shoot photos and those don't. But overall, I've been very impressed with this camera so far. And you know, I haven't used it on a ton of different shoots. I haven't gone out and shot with it a lot, so I'm very eager to use this a lot more. There's a certain standard of quality that is kind of required to hit with cameras like this, and this definitely hits it. And the fact that it's Canon and it has the color science that I like, it's in its log profile. But overall, I'd say for video, if you want a mirrorless filmmaking experience, this is definitely a great competitor in terms of the price point for mirrorless cameras. But I would say if you're not going to be doing photography, there are other competitors out there such as the Blackmagic 4K pocket camera, the Blackmagic 6K pocket camera that, I'm not going to lie, do have higher quality video than this. But if you're going for something that does have photo capabilities in it, for this type of price point, this is definitely a great competitor for that. So if you guys like this video, smash that like button down below, hit subscribe for videos twice a week. I do a lot of these gear reviews, I do a lot of VFX breakdowns, behind the scenes videos and stuff like that. If you have any other questions about this camera or any other cameras or whatever in general, be sure to comment down below. I'll be working on a photo review of this camera coming soon. Also, a couple other reviews of cameras as I've had, and maybe some comparison videos as well. So be sure to look out for that coming forward. And with that, I'll see you guys next time. Bye everyone.